The insane reason why sanity is good for you. This video stems from my examination of Voltaire Candide, so if you want some further context for how these ideas were formed, please check that out first. Okay, this whole monologue is going to be taking a scrupulous look at the phrase, all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. Leibniz viewed it as positive, Voltaire as negative. I think the truth lies somewhere in between. So let's take a look at that phrase. In a negative sense, it could be extremely dangerous and be used to justify any sort of immoral behaviour under the assumption that it will all be part of the greater good of God's plan. It can be used as a tool of religious ignorance to overcome the incoming data of reason and logic. However, it is equally true that it can be used as a positive mental tool, and I think that those positive aspects can be improved upon if we add a little more rationality and reasoning to them. Here we go. First of all, I am going to start with something that I think most people would have a hard time to deny the existence of: good and evil. And let's take an extreme negative example of a serial child killer and rapist, the lowest of the low, absolute scum. There is no doubt in my mind, at least, that that type of behaviour is pure evil. Now, it is plausible that in a state of indifference one might not be affected by this definition, but I will go on to prove that this is not the case, because to be indifferent is to allow such things power over you, no matter how indifferent you remain to them. Anyway, back to the point at hand. Regardless of religious affiliation, I think we can all agree that good and evil exist. Whether these are very complex categorizations of what behaviour is acceptable to allow life to flourish within our social systems or not, or whether there is truly malevolent and benevolent forces acting on our psyches from beyond time, doesn't really matter all that much in regards to this particular video. The point is that the outcome is the same. What can be considered as good and evil exists, even if it is just as complex categorizations of behavioural patterns. With that firmly established, and please explain if you can prove, using logic and reason, that evil and good do not exist, I want to break the above phrase in two and just concentrate on the all is for the best part of it for the moment. Because just like good and evil, I believe that this part of the phrase lies solely in the psyche. And because I would like to think myself a rational mystic rather than a mystic rationalist, I am going to reassign the words good and evil with the words sanity and insanity. So, sanity equals good, using logic and reason to form wisdom, in which the perennial quest is to ultimately build and order something to the very furthest point. This leads to good mental health. Insanity equals not good, ignoring logic and reason to use nonsense and unfounded opinion to destroy all sanity to the furthest point, i.e. void. This leads to bad mental health. Okay, so in order for all to be the best in the psyche, I am going to resurrect some, for me recently discovered post-thought, old philosophy, because I believe it to be at least in part true. If all is for the best, then it must be better for sanity to conquer insanity, rather than to have no objection to sanity whatsoever. Insanity is the natural antithesis of sanity and must always be considered in order to construct higher forms of sanity. No clearer place can this be seen occurring than in a children's television program which is attempting to teach the child about the world by training their minds to separate the sanity from the insanity of the circumstance. No, 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 don't be silly, you don't put the toilet in the kitchen, that's outrageous, etc., etc. So you see, in order for greater sanity to grow, you have to establish the fact that having a toilet in the kitchen would be grossly unhygienic and dangerous. But without the insanity to consider such an illogical scenario in the first place, you could not further the sanity of the fact that one does not shit where one eats. Okay, so we have established that in order for sanity to grow, we must have both sanity and insanity. But let us take the test a little further. If the goal of sanity is to build and order something to its furthest point, surely it has to overcome insanity entirely. If the ultimate goal of insanity is to defeat sanity and therefore have absolute nothingness. And for that, it is going to need its furthest reaches of logic and reason. However, there is a problem here which I am going to explore. Now, I am going to reason using logic that everything must change. Time is unending. Even mountains will crumble with the passage of aeons, and the seas will evaporate, and stars will die and be born, etc. Nothing about this I can detect to be untrue, assuming that our current understanding of how time, entropy, and the laws of physics function, etc. is all correct. Using logic and reason, then, I have arrived at the conclusion that I have found something that is current, as far as I know, true. I mean, it's sanity itself. Everything must change. However, if we take it one step further, we will find ourselves back in the realms of sanity and insanity. And I believe this is where all logic and reason has to turn to the faith that the sanity that led you there in the first place is good. And that's where we bring in paradox. For in order for everything to change, there is one thing that can never change, and that is change itself. And there is nothing untrue in that statement, and yet when applied to itself, it has to contradict itself. It has to become the nonsense of insanity in order to function as the wisdom of sanity. So whereas the ultimate goal of insanity would be absolutely nothing, not even the slightest possibility of anything, because that immediately entails the minutest bit of sanity, the ultimate goal of sanity is to conquer insanity, but always be noble enough to let it have its objection to itself, because this is how you always build more sanity. A paradox should not drive you mad because it contradicts itself. It should inspire you that even at the very limits of wisdom, in fact especially so, nonsense can be found. That nonsense should be explored, but always with the goal of improving the sanity of it. For all logic and reason will push you to a point of belief, whether you believe in your logic and reason or not. That is the true paradox of logic and reason. And it is necessary in order for sanity to conquer insanity. Okay. So all is for the best, because sanity, good, and insanity, evil, exist. And sanity, good, will always strive to conquer insanity, evil. Not destroy it, because it recognizes that this is better than an absence of opposition, whereas insanity, evil, cannot realize this. It is also crucial to realize that the boundaries between insanity and sanity are in a constant state of flux, and in order for the minds of the sane to conquer insanity, they must also realize this. So on to the second half of the famous phrase, in the best of all possible worlds. This is where I think the original falls to pieces, and why it is so adroitly picked apart by Voltaire, who was so deeply affected by the advent of natural disasters. For I think the natural world does not care for what we think. I don't think it would care whether sanity or insanity ran rampant over it. It will simply occur according to its own laws. That's not to say it has no effect upon the psyche. Of course it does. A natural landscape is far more sane than an industrial one. But I think I may be falling into a trap of definitions here, and it is actually because the natural life that covers the world is far more sane than we are. So let's go deeper to the true indifference of reality. Underneath all life, the underlying fabric of reality, the laws of physics, the mathematics, they do not care whether we are sane or not. They will simply interact with the behavior of the sane or insane and react accordingly to the decisions that are made. Now, remember when I said that things that are indifferent to good and evil are still affected and overcome by it, no matter how indifferent they remain? This is what I meant. Perhaps on a more cosmic level, reality is under siege by the consequences of the war between sanity and insanity. It is indifferent to the outcome. It won't care if it becomes a barren rock devoid of life with insanity's victories, and equally it will not care if it becomes a gorgeous paradise full of life. Only sanity and insanity will care about such things. But that's not to say it won't be affected. It undoubtedly will. But because it is so indifferent, it won't care at all. Perhaps that is the lure for such things as sanity and insanity, to see their will enacted upon indifference, to see who takes the chessboard, for the chessboard does not care who takes it. So let's form a conclusion of sorts. The famous phrase, all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds. At this time in my life and understanding, I would rewrite as, all is for the best if sanity exists in an indifferent reality. As ever, thank you for taking the time to listen, and if you have found any faults in my reasoning or you can further any of these ideas presented, please feel free to do so in the comments below. Let us try and make the insane a little more sane together. All the best and cheers.